Okay, welcome to this week's episode of KUDEN Radio, podcast, whatever you want to call it. Dashi Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Got James in the wings, and we're all set for, what is this, episode 215. So we're just cooking right along. Seems like it was just a couple of weeks ago when we did 200, but it's been, Jesus Christ, what, just shy of 4 months. Wow, is that right? One a week? 16, 4 weeks. Yeah, just shy of 4 months. Holy cow. I must have, this must be what it feels like to be over the hill, or like you're on the downhill slide. Anyway, all right. I'm 61 for anybody that cares or doesn't know. Anyway, all right. So during this episode, what we're going to do is take a look at handling a problem with, and again, when I use the term success, please note, if you're like a longtime listener or you're just brand new to this and you hear me use terms like results and success and things like that, I mean, you can define success any way you want, but there's really like two sides, right? There's two sides to everything in the training that we're working through, right? There's the dragon realm and there is the tiger realm, right? Tiger realm is that's the rough and tumble, that's the combat, that's the battlefield, back alley, staircase, meeting somebody halfway up and down when they broke into your house, that kind of thing. And then the dragon realm is being able to produce results in life, right? Everyday life, make our situation better. But as I was giving these things some thought, and what I wanted these episodes to be about, and thinking about this topic, what I've observed, right, both through my own progress and just helping so many students. I mean, I've been helping students since 1988. Where were you in 1988? I just asked a teenage student that tonight. Where were you at 85 or something like that? And they said I wasn't even around. Well, I know, but science would tell something different. Anyway, when it comes to success in either direction, right, there tends to be too much focus on like what needs to be accomplished, the things that need to be done, right? The to-do list. When sometimes what needs to be accomplished is work on eliminating those things that derail us, that knock us off course, right? In this case, distractions. So we're going to talk about handling distractions and a whole bunch of things in that arena when we get back. So stay tuned.
Question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
Yeah, so if you're a bot or you're anything other than a real person, get out, go away. All right. Anyway, all right. So if you missed the lead in, what we're looking at during this episode are distractions, right? We all have them, right? Contrary to popular belief and popular comments that get left on our videos or on these shows or whatever, Sensei, you don't understand, whatever. Okay. No. Those of us who got where we are, right, did not have silver spoons in our mouths, and if I had one, I probably swallowed it and it was sideways. And that's not a fat guy joke. That's just a shit happens kind of thing. But people often think that their situation is unique, and one of my teachers once said, the more unique you think your situation is, or the more unique you think you are, the more average you actually are, right? And at the risk of sounding like I'm using more of that dumbass ninja double speak that we keep getting accused of by certain trolls online because they don't understand the lesson, if everybody thinks that their situation is unique, then that's the average, right? You're not unique. Thinking that you are is the thing, right? And the sooner that we can realize, again, I'm in the same place, right? There's still things that I'm working on and all that, but I didn't start out as a Daishihan, right? What's James? We talked about this before. What's that bias? There's a whole list of biases that we have. What's that list? What's that bias? Anchoring bias, right? Where the way you encounter something or the way you're introduced to it, whether it's a lesson or a concept or a person or whatever, right? Your brain takes this snapshot and there's this assumption that that's the way it's always been, right? And then everything else gets gauged by that thing, right? These mental projections. We'll talk about some of these things tonight, and by all means, by no means do I have an exhaustive list, but we're going to take a look at sources of distractions, like where some of these things come from, what some of them look like. We're going to dive into our Ninjutsu psychological warfare and realm of the spirit studies, the realm of Seishin Teki, personal development and whatnot. And we're going to ferret out and see where a lot of these things come from and how they distract. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time with it because any of these things could be a program in and of itself. But we really need to get a handle on this thing, and we need to be able to move things from vagueness, right? I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. I just keep getting distracted. How do you get distracted? What causes the distraction? What internally, right, is allowing those things to happen, right? Just saying distraction is like saying enlightenment. It's like saying mastery. It's like saying, I want to be a black belt in ninjutsu. What the hell does that mean, right? I mean, I remember way back when I first started in the art. We're talking way early '80s. It was one of the first trips that Hatsumi Sensei had come to the U.S. and he brought, I think he brought Nagato Sensei with him. Might have been Ishizuka Sensei. He brought a couple of them. Anyway, I remember getting this story. Now I got this story secondhand. But we all enjoyed the story. There was this journalist who came in, right? I mean, this ninja grandmaster coming in from Japan, right? And so he came in and, was doing some of the training, but then he was also, doing interviews and whatnot for this big write-up he was going to do. And at some point, I can't remember if it was after one of the days of training, if it was at the end of the weekend, doesn't really matter. There's this dinner and he's chatting with, I believe it was Nagato Sensei. You have to pardon me if I have the names off, because I believe that they would all have done the same thing. But anyway, at some point in the conversation, this guy says, "Man, I would do anything to be a black belt or to have a black belt in ninjutsu," right? And Nagato Sensei grabs a beer coaster, right? The ones with the little like branded Heineken, whatever, right? On one side, flips this thing over and writes out basically a Shodan certificate and hands it to him. Just slides it across. He goes, "There you go. Now you're a black belt in ninjutsu." And the guy was just like, I don't know if I can find it in all the stuff that I have historically from years gone by, but I've got this story somewhere, and he actually wrote about it. It ended up in one of those editorials or something in one of the major magazines. That he was so proud, and here's this dude. He wrote it out on a beer coaster. How fucking special could that be, right? But he got what he wanted, right? That's how easy it was. Here you go. Now you're a black belt, okay? But we're gonna approach this. We're gonna come full circle here. So I'm gonna do a little spoiler alert, right? One of the keys to to handling a lot of these things, especially when it's our own vulnerability or our own personality weakness, or I don't know, we'll call these things by a bunch of different names tonight, is to try to figure out what's at the root of it. Right. Well, I'll talk about this more as we go along, but what I really want to start with, because again, we're going to be talking about handling distractions, right? So we can better stay on track, right, toward accomplishing whatever we're doing. And I don't care if it's you getting your black belt or your next level black belt, or it's starting training, or it's staying in training, or it's taking that vacation that you want, or it's, continuing through your days so that you just have a better experience of life. I don't care what it is, right? Again, I mentioned this earlier in the lead-in. Very often, I think most of the time, right, even the most disciplined or even the most serious or directed student person, right, puts too much focus on what needs to be accomplished, right? The to-do list, right? The rungs on the ladder. When sometimes what needs to be accomplished is work on eliminating those things that derail us, that actually, getting rid of the distractions. Okay? They can't understand why they keep working the list and they keep practicing or training or trying to, and they keep getting knocked off course. I know I did. I couldn't figure it out until I was introduced to this kind of a counterintuitive lesson, right? How can you focus too much on the stuff that needs to be done and the skills that need to be learned or practiced and the techniques that need? Well, but if we keep getting knocked off track, if I train in a class or 3 classes in a row and then I'm knocked off track for a week or 5 weeks or 16 or 30 years, whatever, right? And it just keeps happening, then the problem isn't the to-do list. The problem isn't the rungs on the ladder to go from ground level to the roof or the tree limb or whatever we're heading for. That's not the problem. The problem is that we keep getting derailed. But the problem isn't, I pissed off somebody online with a recent Whiteboard Wednesday, right? What I said was that the problem isn't the problem is how we think about the problem. And he called it, what do you call it, James? Some kind of backwards twisted ninja double speak BS or something like that, right? But it's true, right? It's not that we're distracted, because anybody can be distracted. I'm going to go down through a list of 5 types of or sources of distractions, right? And a lot of these things are normal, okay? But they don't have to be the thing that just keeps happening, right? These things, most of these things happen temporarily, right? But we have to identify, right? So it's not the distractions happen, it's what kind, what's the source of the distractions? Because once we know those things, then we can clearly fix it, right? And I know I keep mentioning, well, if you're new, then you've never heard me mention this before. But for a lot of you, you're probably tired of hearing me mention the life purpose discovery process, right? It's a short program that we have. James, you can post a link to it for anybody that might want it, but it's a very short program, right? It's a short introduction and very short instructions for going through 5 exercises. 2 of the exercises have a part 1, part 2 kind of thing. So it's 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and after that there's 3, 4, and 5. Right? So I guess, what is that? Maybe it's 7 exercises, whatever. Anyway, so the third exercise, what you're doing is you're pulling information and things that you ran through exercises 1 and 2. They get transferred over, and what you really have is the gist of these is you've come up with a couple, 2, 3, no more than half a dozen things that you must have in your perfect life. Like if you could wave a magic wand or a magic ninja sword or lightsaber or whatever, right? These things would absolutely be a part of a perfect life. By the way, they're supposed to be taken seriously, right? Instead of lamenting that we don't have it, right? I find it, I learned the hard way that, and this is actually a counterintuitive process, but unless we're focusing on those things and creating those things, then saying that I want a better life, right? I want a better experience. I want to be happier. It's just too freaking vague, right? So, but anyway, I think there's a worksheet in the booklet that comes with it. Otherwise, you can just take a piece of notebook paper and draw a line vertically right down the middle from top to bottom. And then on one side, you number the number that you have. I think I have 5, and I haven't redone mine in a while and probably should, because I've accomplished, I think, all 5. So I should probably go through it again. Anyway, so down the left column or left side of it, you would put these. I have 5, so I would number 1 through 5, but I would put lots of space, several lines between each of those things, and then the things, and these were things that I garnered out of exercises 1 and 2. Okay, so they would go on, 1 on each line. Generally, the more important ones, or the ones with the heavier emotional allure or sting or whatever, would go at the top, and then just descending order priority wise. If you start to hear some gurgling noise, my dog is sleeping and he's starting to snore, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, and then like personalizing an episode. So but again, if you run into something where you can't decide, indecisiveness sucks, right? Warriors decide, right? Just pick one. Okay? If you can't decide which one's higher on the list between 4 and 5 or 1 and 2, or just pick one. Right? It doesn't matter. What's important is that we do the work. Okay, so that goes down the left side, and then on the right side, to the right of the vertical line that you drew, next to each one, those extra lines that you put in, that's for writing out what you believe to be or know to be the hindrances. What's getting in the way of that thing being your reality, right? So let's say, well, not let's say, one of mine was only being in mutually beneficial relationships. Okay, so over on the right side, next to that, I would have being connected to or too close to people that were my way or the highway kind of people, people that were, they wanted to be in a balanced, fair relationship as long as they got the bigger piece of pie, or whatever it was, right? That kind of thing, right? And so you write these things in place, and then the gist of that exercise is that you've actually written out a roadmap once you get the right side completed for each of those perfect life indicator kind of things. And we always steer people away from material things, like I want a big house, I want a shiny car, and whatever, because what you're really saying is, if I don't have that thing, then I'm not going to be happy. Well, okay. I mean, if you need to put that down and that's your gist, then by all means. But once you have the outline, once you have this description for each of these things, then what you have is a roadmap. Because what we're going to systematically do is eliminate the impediments. We're going to eliminate those things. And then as we eliminate these things, what ends up happening is that condition that we wanted should happen by default, right? Everybody wants to work on producing the condition without eliminating the distractions or the problems or the impediments or whatever, right? But if we eliminate those things, then the condition that we want, or the thing that we want, like one of mine was access to my easy and ready and consistent access to my teachers, right? The ability to authentically be myself, right? So if I eliminate the impediments, then that should happen by default. If it doesn't, then I've convinced myself, or I've been following the wrong things. Because if we eliminate impediments to something that is a natural condition, let's say it's, I want to be happier, right? Well, why are you not happy? Well, I hang out with people that are duds. Right? Well, okay, I change my friends. I change all these things. And if I'm still not happy, then there's a different problem. And for a lot of people, it's a choice. They haven't actually decided to be happy. They're expecting other people to make them happy. They're blaming other people for their unhappiness or whatever. Okay, I'm just kind of throwing things out there, but that's one of these things, right? So one of the things that can pop out, and I mentioned this earlier, was this idea of discipline. But here's the thing. What I found was that what often looks like discipline, and I guess you could define it as discipline, but what often looks like discipline is actually, in part, handling distractions, the ability to handle distractions. So here we are, right, with this episode. So we're going to dive in. So in a minute here, well, maybe a couple of minutes, we're going to start off by taking a look at a list of sources of distractions. Okay, but before we do that, don't forget, like, share, subscribe, help us get this stuff out to other people, other warriors and other warrior protectors who need it and want it. And yeah, that'd be great. Before we jump in, also, James, who do we have on? Who do I need to say hi to? Any questions, comments up to this point? Anybody yelling, bullshit, foul, unfair, right? You're old, you're fat, you're bald. The normal obvious stuff that, like, I didn't know that. Nobody else can see it. Really? Oh my God.
The only ones that have signed in so far is Jared, Dave, and Glenn Baker. Just also good evening.
Awesome. Usual suspects. All right. So, cool beans. Welcome to summer, by the way, as far as the official thing goes. Okay, so let's dive into things. So let's take a look at some sources of distractions. For those of you who are training in the Mikyo realms and whatnot, if you know these things, you know how to place them on the mandala. For those who are not, don't worry about it, right? You don't need that. It just helps those who are there with relationship orientation and whatever. Don't worry about it. You don't need it. Okay. What I do want to say before I jump into these sources of distractions is there is a common misconception that goes along with that anchoring bias that, you don't understand, Sensei, you didn't have these problems. You have always been, because they've taken a snapshot. And so they make these assumptions. One, we haven't been, but two, it is really easy to slip into the mindset of those you surround yourself with the most. And even if you're a loner, okay, you can't get out of your own head, so you're surrounded by your own thoughts. Okay? So there becomes a problem, right? So the Buddha said that even the enlightened ones must continually mind. They have to guard their mind. Otherwise, people that they surround themselves with, this idle chatter and all kinds of crap that goes on, will seep in, right? It's just the way the mind is built. Anything that is attached to the word I or me, the subconscious that doesn't know the difference between what's going on out there in the world and what's going on in here, right, in the mind, doesn't know the difference. Anything that's attached to the word I or me, that kind of thing, it personalizes, which is why it's just critical to, I don't care if you call it a support group, a mastermind, you become a member of a dojo, you hang out with people who think and speak and carry themselves and whatnot the way you want to be, not the way you have been, or for my Canadian friends, the way you have been, right? So it's just important. The dojo family, if it's a dojo and not just a martial arts school, right? That's me since it's often differentiated between the two, right? You can have a successful martial arts school and still not have a successful dojo, because one implies a bond and a family kind of thing, as opposed to and one connected to a stream, right? This lineage, this view, right, of past generations of like-minded people, right? Very different from people who just come in, pay for classes, show up for class, learn some stuff, right? Earn some belts, go home. Right? It's not the same. Anyway, all right. So sources of distractions. Let's do that. Right? So I'm going to go through a list, and because this is where things start. Okay. We all get it. We get distracted. We get knocked off course. But what was the distraction? Okay. So again, these are in no particular order. They do line up with the different sections of the mandala for those who are studying that stuff. If you're not, don't worry about it. If you're interested in it, we've got plenty of programs that can lead you to that point where you can make that transition. But either way, right? And again, I wrote these things down in no particular order. They just popped out of my head. So here's what they are, right? So sources of distraction. 1, time bandits. Okay. You know what time bandits are? James, you know what a time bandit is? Somebody that, has a clock around their neck like Flavor Flav did, and a mask around their eyes. No, sorry. It's not that. Although, anyway, getting drawn in and just staring mindlessly at videos that have this guy with gold teeth and a big ass clock and, gorgeous women hanging off his ugly. Anyway, sorry, he's dead. So anyway, Sensei, you're a dick, and then some. But anyway, let's keep going. So do you know what a time bandit is?
It's just anything that basically steals time from you. It's wasted time, not getting anything done.
Yeah. So time bandits tend to come in a couple of different forms. I'm just going to name a couple, right? One is friends and family that think that you're available because they are. So no matter what you're doing, right, they've got to tell you the story. They, call you up middle of the day, right, have a long conversation. Now, if you've got the time, not that big of a deal. Okay. But I'm talking about when they call in the middle of something and you feel obligated to take the time to involve yourself in idle chatter or something that can't be handled now at the moment anyway, or just, but that's what friends do. That's what family does. No, that's what friends and family do when they've got nothing else to do or going on. Okay. So anyway, I'll go back through and we'll take a look at how to handle these things and whatever. There's lots of ways to do it. I'm just going to toss out a couple. Right. So anyway, time bandits. Right. Number 2, what I call shiny object syndrome, also known as SOS. And everybody know what SOS is? And I don't mean the military army stuff, shit on a shingle, which was cream chip beef on toast or something like that when I was in. SOS, right? It's an emergency signal, right? Anyway, shiny object syndrome. Shiny object syndrome is we just keep chasing after things that get our attention, right? Whether it's our own thoughts or, well, just, you know what? Speaking of that, let me go back to the time bandits, right? One type of time bandit is friends and family. Other types of time bandits are other people that kind of strike up a conversation. It kind of starts like this. How about them Yankees? Think it might rain today? That kind of thing. And then it just turns into this, it's just this idle chatter. Okay. Now, I understand that that's important in the context of rapport building when we meet somebody new or developing a relationship or whatever. But if we're using it, then it's purposeful. But if we always slip into these things, and the next thing you know, it's an hour later, it's 2 hours later, right? We've engaged in something called theft of time, right? Where we got paid for half an hour. I fired a contractor during the rebuild of my house because I happened to be home when they were working on things, and somebody stopped over with a question for him. It was somebody, another contractor, had a question for him, and he answered the question, and then they got involved in a hour and a half conversation about life. And then he billed me for that hour and a half because he was in my house. That didn't go well. I didn't actually fire him because of the hour and a half. I called him on the hour and a half when he billed me for it. And then he said if he was in my house, then he was getting paid. Well, that didn't go well. So he's now bilking other people because he didn't get a chance to bilk me. Anyway, right? So, but it's just others generally, right? And then another one is me, right? I'm prone to daydreaming or scrolling or whatever, right? Things that just get in the way. And this leads us to the shiny object syndrome, right? So the shiny object syndrome could be anything, right? But what draws our attention, right? Well, I'm going to talk about some of these things because it's a mental thing as we move on. But it's just anything that catches your attention, right? Causes us to binge watch a series on Netflix, or we watch a couple of episodes and then I'm kind of done with that one. And instead of going to do what we needed to do, right? Well, I wonder what else is on. Oh, I haven't seen that one for a while. Holy shit, I didn't even know that was on Netflix. Wow, I'm going to watch that one again, or whatever. Right? So just, right? What's the cat doing? Let's put down some catnip and watch the cat for a while. Those kind of things, right? Another source of distraction is not having a plan of action, right? So what we find ourselves in, we find ourselves in a situation or in a condition where we don't know what to do now, or we finish that, we don't know what to do next. Okay? So that then loops back around to us filling our time with what? Okay. The next one is no vision, right? And what that is I don't have a goal to aim for, or what the goal that I'm aiming for is vague. Okay, so I don't have a vision, right? So this, again, a lot of these things just loop back, right? I can spend an inordinate amount of time myself, right, as my own time bandit, trying to figure out what to do next. Or have you ever done this? Have you ever done a Google search? And I can get caught up in paralysis through analysis, just like anybody else. but I'll do a Google search to look up something that I'm researching for the thing that I'm working on in the moment. And the next thing you know, I've read 5 articles on the same thing, and maybe or 2 articles, and watched 3 videos from different people about the same thing, and I have to snap out of that. Like, okay, or you keep bumping into the same information. Researching, it's not getting it done. So let's go. Or this has happened to me. I've gone over to my YouTube channel to post something, to update something or whatever, and as soon as it pops up, there's my dashboard, right, with topics that I'm interested in. And if I'm not careful, I don't want to lose this, because I know sometimes they get shuffled around. So I'll click on it. Next thing you know, I've shot through 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. I got to get back to this other thing. Right? So it's like shaking off a drowsy fog. So anyway, that, and then there are, we're going to call them moods and emotions, or the lack thereof. Okay? And this usually shows up in the form of daydreaming. It could show up in the form of, that I really don't feel like working on it today, or just not feeling motivated, those kind of things. But it can show up in many other ways as well. Right? In fact, in the ninjas, Seishin Teki, right? Spiritual development, personal development, realm of the spirit. You see it described in a bunch of different ways. It's also under the realm of psychological warfare. Okay, and it falls under in the 8 gates of the Ninja no Hachimon, the 8 gates of authentic ninjutsu. One of the non-negotiable areas of study that must be done before somebody can say that they're studying and practicing ninjutsu is the Ninja no Uge, and that is influence, deception, manipulation, those kind of things. Okay, and so in that category, or within that category, there are 2 lists based on the Godai, those 5 elements that are known as the 5 weaknesses and the 5 needs. And from one perspective, from the Ninja no Uge perspective, these are things that a ninja would use to get somebody to do what they wanted. Okay? If I save them from their fears, right, or I nurture, right, I know what their weaknesses are and I feed those, or I feed their needs and give them what they want, they'll pretty much do whatever I want. Okay, but these 2 things, these 2 lists from the realm of Seishin Teki, personal development, are things that we want to ferret out to make sure that we're not our own worst enemy, that we're not being manipulated like puppets on a string by others. And what's funny is that one of these areas, people that think that they are they're nonconformists, they know about all this corruption and stuff in the world, and they're hip to the jig and all those kind of things, right? That they're not susceptible to them, but they are, because they take great pleasure in researching these things, getting validation, right? Yeah. So anyway, right? So we're going to ferret these things out. So that's going to be the next step. We're going to take a look at the 5 weaknesses. We're going to take a look at the 5 needs, and then we'll take a look at applying some solutions to not getting caught up with these things, or caught up in these things. I've got a little lesson from Hatsumi Sensei on one of these things, and then I actually one of them. I'm not going to jump into all the time bandits, because that's where the solutions are. We're going to go back to the sources of distractions, because one of the first things is ferreting out what it is that distracts me, primarily, secondarily, right? What are the ones that get me, right? Doesn't matter what gets anybody else. And then I'm going to apply solutions to those. Now, I have some broad stroke solutions. There's one that I'm going to pull in something that's actually used by military officers in the planning of mission fulfillment. And then we'll also take a look at something that Hatsumi Sensei taught me on this, in this area. It's not the same thing. The lesson from Hatsumi Sensei will be about the weaknesses and needs. The military thing will be in relation to actually two of the distractions that were in the original list of sources. Right. So before we dive into these, anybody have any questions or comments? James, anything pop up from anybody? Anybody else jump in midway before I really sink my teeth into the weaknesses and needs?
Trinity said hello. And
Hola.
Dave said Time Bandits was a great movie.
See how easily people get distracted? Dave, I miss you. And then you show up. Yeah, I mean, people will probably get butthurt about that. Can't believe he talks to people like that. Yeah, okay. So, one, I tend to only hang out with people who are confident and are well adjusted. And two, I don't have to walk on eggshells. So there's that. Right? Anybody but me noticed that in a realm where we're nurturing warriors, or people are presenting themselves as warriors, there's a lot of crying going on. I mean, like, diaper changes are needed regularly. It just boggles my mind, right? I'm going to take on the dragons of ignorance and desire, and I'm going to take on all these assholes in the world that need to be put in their place. But he called me a name. Anyway, I know Sensei's an ass. We covered that already, right? So anyway, all right. So let's dive in. Okay. So 5 weaknesses. Let's do those first. These are all these lists are Godai based, and so what that means is that, one, they're associated with the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, void. Chisui ka fuku, for those of you who do the Japanese. And yes, I said fu and ku, not what you thought I might have said, right? Fuku. That's how I have them organized, right? By the elements in ascending order. So chi, sui, ka, fu, ku, earth, water, fire, wind, void. They're just examples from this thing. It just makes it easier to catalog things. So it's not just a random list. So we'll do those first, and then we'll take a look at the list of 5 needs, right? So as weaknesses, and again, these are not necessarily sources of distractions. They could be, right? But they're also manifestations of they're manifestations of things going on the inside, right? Often ego, for whatever reason, right? And my Mikyo teacher, Reverend Jigai, gave me a lesson one time about ego being a self-defense mechanism. Right? So we've had trauma, or we want certain things or don't want certain things, or we have sensitivities or whatever it is. And so, or we've had experiences, right? Heartbreak, right? I was in love once, broke my heart. Never gonna love anybody ever again. Yeah. I fell out of a chair once too, and I'm never gonna sit down ever again. It just, the logic, that just boggles the mind. Anyway, so but it's this self-defense mechanism. And so one of the ways that this manas vijnana, this section of the brain works, is it not just differentiating between this here, that there, whatever, right? But you also have this area of this little device, right, called the amygdala, and it's a early defense mechanism. And so it gets programmed whenever we tell it that we don't want to look at certain things, experience certain things. There's certain things we want to avoid, loss, being poor, whatever, right? Whatever the hot spot is, we've been there before, don't ever want to go back, or whatever, or we've seen the damage, or we're afraid of something. So we've loaded up with this programming. And so now the amygdala is it's part of the subconscious processes, but it's on the lookout for any hint of these things. And when something looks like it might happen, then it fires off signals to the hypothalamus, and it drops a bunch of friggin' peptides and all kinds of chemicals into the system that put us in this state, right? In these different states. But here's the point. We told ego we don't want to have to fill in the blank. We don't want to experience fill in the blank. Okay? There's lots of ways to structure this, but once it has it, then what ego will do to keep us from having to look at it is it will distract us. So, I'd like the outcome of something. I want the benefits, but I don't want to have to do the hard work to make it happen. Or I want it to happen a certain way, or whatever, right? And so ego will go, look over here. Okay? It's like a magician. Right? As a matter of fact, in the earlier works that come behind and support our Mikyo stuff, there is one of these teachings. It's called The Magic Show of the Mind, and it paints a picture of ego being this master illusionist. And guess what? We're the audience. Okay? So we don't know this is happening, or we're not vigilant about when our own ego is the source of the distraction. Right? So the uphill climb is going to be even steeper. But anyway, so I'm going to go through these things very, very quickly. Just know that if I say anything that resonates, right, or that it has some sting to it, I'm not talking about you. Okay? Specifically, I'm just listing things. So if you see yourself in it, note to self. Okay? So what that means is I'm not targeting anybody, and I didn't put things on here as any kind of passive-aggressive agenda. Have we ever heard that before, James? You centered me out. That was all about, that was a personal attack. Dude, I was teaching to a group of freaking 12 or 20 or whatever people. If you saw yourself in it, that's on you, right? This was a general lesson. And just like if somebody comes up to me afterwards, oh my God, that was awesome. That's exactly what I needed. It was almost like you were teaching right to me. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate that you saw the value in it and it resonated with you, but I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the group, right? You were a member of the group. So in that case, I was talking to you, but it wasn't a lesson just for you. I mean, if it was, then I ripped off 24 other people or whatever, because it was going to be valueless to them. All right. So here's the warning. If the sting happens, I didn't center you out. This is not about you from my direction. This is a general lesson because this is a podcast. Okay? Just because it feels like we're talking one-on-one or I'm talking to you, because you're not sitting in a room with all the other listeners at the same time, doesn't change anything. Okay? But those stings, those lumps in the throats, those uneasy feelings, right? Reverend Jikai was very, very clear on those kind of things, right? That's touching home, and ego's trying to shift things. That those are notes to self, right? These are the things that highlight, right? If it's intellectual, when I do that, nope, not it. It's when the emotive sting happens, when the emotions arise. Write that shit down, because that becomes your to-do list for work. Okay. All right. So Earth realm, weaknesses, laziness. All right. How's laziness a distraction? Really? Laying around eating Cheetos and licking the cheese dust off your fingers and not doing anything? That's not a distraction? Well, that's not what I would consider a distraction. A distraction is like somebody got your attention and drew your attention away from this other thing that you needed to be doing. Okay, so ego decided that it needed a nap, right? Or it needed to wait for a better time or whatever. Okay. Now, there's a lot of things that fall under this thing, right? I mentioned some of these things before. I don't feel like doing it right now. I don't feel motivated, whatever. That's all sluggish mind, right? Not up to it today. Tomorrow's not looking good either. those things. Anyway, Sui, the water realm, right? This is anger. Okay. Anger can be a distraction. Okay. Because I'm not getting anything done. If I'm expressing my disdain for what this other person did, okay, well, I'd have to be paying attention to what that other person did for them to be pissing me off and for me to be angry in the moment. I had to have been scrolling to come across a video or a meme or something that hit a hot button that fell within our belief system. These things piss me off, and then next thing you know, the mind starts creating these thoughts or runs this loop. And what am I doing? Well, I'm staring at the tree full of chattering monkeys, watching them throw shit at each other instead of doing the stuff I'm supposed to be doing. Right? So either way, right? Anger. Ka, under the fire realm, is fear. Right? We can get distracted by how much, like, I don't like speaking to strangers. I don't make friends easily. I don't like doing that thing. What will they think of me? Whatever. Okay. So, and we have to be careful because, well, I'll get back to this. Things are not always what they seem to be. Right? I'll get back to that because it goes directly to the lesson from Matsumi Sensei. Under the wind realm is sympathy, right? Or empathy. Often people say compassion, but compassion, sympathy and empathy are aspects of compassion. Compassion at its core is giving somebody what they need to do better, to be better, to overcome something, whatever. It's giving them what they need, right? Compassion is neither good nor bad. It's neither pleasant or unpleasant. It can be either one because we're addressing their need, not feel good. Compassion has absolutely nothing to do with being nice. It may come across as nice because that's what's necessary, but compassion in and of itself is not nice. Compassion is observant and direct. Okay? Compassion is tuned in to the suffering of someone else or the state that someone else is in. And then there are all these tools in the compassion toolbox. It makes up 1/3 of one of the mandala. 1/3. Okay? And there's a bunch of tools in that 1/3. Okay? Anybody that knows the Taizokai mandala knows what I'm talking about. Okay? There's a bunch of things in there. Okay, and then ku, under the ku level, the void level, is vanity. Okay, it's vanity, because vanity, the void is about thinking, creativity, that kind of stuff. So the focus just happens to be on what I look like, how I'm presenting myself to others, how others perceive me, how I need them to perceive me. Right. So again, from a psychological warfare, uge kind of perspective, man, you push on people's hot buttons or let them have, right? It's hard to believe that people would enjoy being angry or they derive a benefit from that. some people are just fucking angry. I mean, and they get there really, really fast. And here's a piece of science for us. And it's not just the anger thing. It's any of these. I'm sure we all learned in, I don't know what, junior high school or middle school science class about cells and subdivision. And oh my God, Sensei, don't mention that stuff. No test, okay? I'm not going to test you on it, right? But we learned about cells don't grow. They don't have offspring. They don't lay eggs, and that makes new cells, right? They subdivide, okay? And when they split, right, the new cells are called sister cells. And so that's just how we learned that, that's how the body makes more cells. That's how we grow, that kind of thing. That's how we replace cells as other ones die, whatever. But there's this interesting little thing that on cells, there are these, layman's terms, docking ports. And these ports are connectors for these things that the hypothalamus kicks out when and they induce emotional states. They're called peptides. Okay, I don't want to bore you. I'm going to make this really, really fast. So they're on a healthy cell, on a what we'll call it, an enlightened person cell, whatever. Okay, on cells of people that can easily shift in and out of different emotions. They're not stuck in certain states, fear, anger, whatever. Okay, there is a wide variety of these portals for these different peptides. But on people that, I'm just going to pick anger, on somebody that's angry a lot, right? And this is part of that accidental living as opposed to intentional living. Somebody who's angry a lot, science has shown that when their cells subdivide, the new sister cells have more docking ports for the anger peptide, again, layman's terms, for the anger peptide than it does for anything else, because the human system is very adaptive, and we adapt in a way that gets us from where we are to where we need to be as quickly as possible. Okay, like people live in North Dakota because we're a hardy bunch and it's fucking freezing up here, so, or wherever, right? So they have more peptides for this particular state, because since they're in it so often, the system adapts so we can get there very quickly. So when somebody seems to be angry all the time, or they can get to anger really, really quickly, they're built for it. They're built for it, just like somebody who's built for fear, just like somebody who's built for, you name it, right? Again, these emotional states. So interesting stuff. Okay, so let's jump over to the needs. Okay, so those are the 5 weaknesses: laziness, anger, fear, sympathy, vanity. Right. The more time I spend, sympathy. Right. The more time I spend sympathizing with, making sure somebody else is okay, that kind of thing, the less I'm getting my own stuff done. Okay. The more, and it's not that we shouldn't be sympathetic. This is not about not being these things. The distraction comes when we're doing that all the fucking time. Right? When our default mechanism is fear, when we're spending so much time worrying about how we look and how we come across and whether people like us, or, right? It's just, right? It's a distraction. Okay. Now, people may enjoy the distraction. They may use it as a crutch, whatever. See, now we're going to come over to the needs. Different list, same 5 elements, different characteristics, but they're not connected. The question is, how are they connected in any individual? Okay, because that's where the personalized work comes in. That's where the Seishin Teki, the personal development, spiritual refinement, those kind of things come in. Okay, so again, same order: Chi, Sui, Ka, Fu, Ku, Earth, Fire, Wind, Earth, Water, Fire, Wind, Void. Right. So in the Earth level, as far as needs, what we have is security and or comfort. Okay, security or comfort. Right. I don't care who's in charge. I don't care how the country's run. I don't care about governmental structures. I don't care about what the neighbors are doing. I don't care about any of these things. As long as people just leave me the hell alone. As long as I'm comfortable, I don't care. Okay. As long as nobody's stirring the pot, I don't care. Right. Somebody could be conflict averse. What that means is they don't like when like somebody yells, or they don't like getting into arguments or whatever, right? Because it's not comfortable. Right. So they're big on comfort zones. Okay? And that's fine. Right? Security and comfort are important in a natural, balanced human being, and that human being's natural, balanced life. Okay, or identifying here is under needs, just like under weaknesses. It's when there's an inordinate amount of attention to that. Okay, so it becomes a distraction because all of our time, effort, and energy is going there. Okay. In the water realm, it's sex or sense addictions. Okay? So it's really being addicted to this sensual pleasure kind of thing. But it might not be sex. It might be food. It might be who knows? It might be porn. It might be what else? It might be music. It could be anything. Right. But in this case, it's being used as an escape, right? To not have to deal with things in the moment. Okay. There's people in relationships that when they're not having sex is great, right? They hate each other, or they're always fighting. Okay. Same thing. There's, people that when they've got too much time on their hands, right? They are eating, right? So idle time is time to put food in their face. Okay? So that's water. Fire realm is wealth. Wealth could be money. Okay? Could be. Right? But it could also just be stuff. Right? People that shop a lot. Right? So yeah, I know they're spending and using all their money, but they're accumulating symbols of, right? I'm somebody. Okay. It's what does in most people that play the lottery and win. Okay. They play the lottery because, right, they're high on hopium. Right. They don't have a plan for wealth except the numbers coming up on their card. And then when they do, most of them are broke again within a year because they didn't have budgeting or financial sense before they won all that money. They're certainly not going to, Scotty from the enterprise is not going to beam it into their brain after they get the money. What they end up doing is just buying bigger shit. And then they end up having to sell all that shit because they didn't have budgeting skills. They knew nothing about economics. Right. Oh, I forgot about taxes. Holy shit. I forgot. Oh, I bought this thing. Now it's going to cost me money to maintain it. Okay. Oh, I always wanted that big boat. I know somebody that bought a $250,000 boat. It has a single stateroom, like a galley, kitchen, about that big, and the bathroom's a little bit bigger than it. Right. $250,000. Okay. Look at my boat. Look at my boat. And then they bitch and complain all the time that it cost them $700 to fill it with fuel every time they fill it up. How did you think it was going to cost? Right? If you, there's an old saying, if you have to ask how much the insurance is, or how much the maintenance is, or how much the gas is, or whatever, you can't afford it. I don't care if you can afford the payments, you can't afford to keep that thing. If you have to ask, you can't afford it. Okay? Now, do you want to afford it? See, that's a different question. What's it going to take to afford it? Now, see, now I have what I mentioned before, I have a goal, and now I will develop a plan to produce that result, to have, maintain, keep, enjoy, right? Enjoy it, that kind of thing, right? So anyway, but it's not, wealth is not necessarily just money. Yes, there's lots of people that chase it down and all that kind of stuff. And I know we hate the rich people, right? Because they have the stuff that, see, wind is about envy and or pride. It's same energy. Pride is, this is mine. Look what I did. Bragging rights, all that. Envy is, I really want that thing that they have. That's awesome, right? It's keeping up with the Joneses, the neighbors, that kind of thing, right? So if I can't have it, well, then I'll undermine them. I'll knock them. I'll guilt them, whatever, okay? So envy, pride, and then the void realm, ku, is pleasure. But Sensei, I thought you said pleasure was with the sex and sense addictions. Yeah, no, it's the void is an accumulation of all things, and it's also for things that don't fit neatly into any one of those other things. So pleasure could be security, comfort, could be sex or sense pleasures, could be wealth, those kind of things, but it goes way beyond that. Okay, so the idea with the pleasure, again, we're beyond just security or pleasure or whatever. It's seeking more. Okay, it's avoiding the unpleasant. And Mikyo, one of the core premises of dukkha, right? I know it sounds like I just said like doo-doo or whatever, right? Dukkha is the Sanskrit word for suffering, discontent, right? And there's lots of things in there. There's actual physical pain, there's mental anguish, there's a whole bunch of things. Just this one word kind of sums up the state of life or state of being where things are just not the way I want. But the reasoning behind that is this thing called trishna, misdirected desire. I want things the way they can't be, right? I want things to last longer than they can. I want things, I want the benefits of things without having to do the work, whatever. Okay? And so at its core, ego is like a 3-year-old. It's constantly tracking down or chasing down pleasure and avoiding pain. Sounds perfectly reasonable, right? It's a primitive response. Okay, but if that were true, then we'd never get a shot of antibiotic because I'm afraid of needles. Okay, great. We could take a pill. Well, I don't like swallowing pills. Okay, so die. But the idea with it is that there's more to it, right? So this pleasure at this void realm, it includes a need for personal expression. So this is the person that always cuts off people in a conversation. They need to be at the forefront of things. People, there's a lot of people that derive pleasure from deep philosophical conversations about history, time, whatever. Okay, it's not, these things are not useful, right? But they can also be distractions. Okay. What else do I have in here? Research to validate ego's belief. So people will, they'll, they have certain beliefs, so they go and they validate those things. Then they do more research to show just how bad the problem is. Meanwhile, they can't solve their own. Okay? So anyway, again, there's these different areas. So how do we fix it, right? How do we ferret these things out? Well, I already said that you need to first figure out where, right? What are the sources of distractions for you individually, right? I'm working on my own. you need to figure out yours individually, right? This is not for me. Well, Sensei, what do you think mine are? Well, unless I know you really, really well and I'm around you a lot, I can't even hint at it. I don't know, right? What I see is the outcome. I see people not showing up for training. I see people not, they're on for a class or two, and then I don't see them for 5 or 20, right? The ones that I know are engaged, and I don't mean getting ready to get married. I mean, they're engaged with the program. I was just talking to one of them tonight. He said he sent an email because he was having a connection issue, or there were a couple of links that seemed to be transcribed. We have a problem every once in a while, James, when he copies things over. We clone something, and it just makes it easier for us. Change some imagery and whatever, and then all we have to do is swap out links, and we're all good. And sometimes, and it's usually, correct me if I'm wrong, James, it's usually around when they're doing like an update or something. It just seems like the system freezes and goes into a holding pattern, and then he'll change it, save it, and everything is good. And then they'll make this adjustment to the software on the back end. We don't own it. They do it on the back end, and next thing you know, it rolls right back to what the old one was. And he just has to go in and update it once the update has fully taken effect. I don't understand technology. I just know that we have to put up with it. So it allows us to do the things that we want to do, but the kind of shit we have to do in the back end to make sure it's working right. Anyway, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it. But we know who's actually studying and practicing and staying up with things, because there's a core group of students that as soon as there's a glitch in the matrix, or they don't have access or whatever, they're right there. An email comes in, or they let us know that one of these links were off, or whatever, right? It's easy. Other ones, I haven't heard from them since they signed up. I assume that they're training, and I'm assuming I know what they say about assuming, but I choose to assume because they're still in the program, right? So I'm assuming they're getting value. I'm assuming they're doing things, and I'm also assuming they don't have any questions, and the lessons are clear, and they're not looking for ranks. So it's all good, right? Okay. Anyway, so that's what we have with that. We'll jump into solutions here in a minute. Let's just see, James, any questions, comments, other than movie references? Dave, keep your movie references.
Dave just said the problem with the lottery is someone else always wins his money.
I'm going to go with I believe you. See, my problem with the lottery is they've made the way to win it consistently illegal. Because people have done it, that's how they won it, but then the state comes behind and closes up a loophole. Because the way to win it is to take out a loan to buy up as many tickets as possible, and to pay for people to stand at certain outlets, buy up as many as possible, right? They've completely outlawed you just buying all the tickets. You can't do that. You can't even buy a significant percentage of the tickets. So, but you get a loan, pay the people for their time, you have them buy up as many tickets as possible. You still might not win the grand prize, but you will win a lot. You pay back the loan, you pay these people, and you will still have a lion's share. Right? See, my problem is I don't have the time to hire these people. Trust that they're not going to run off with the tickets. I've got a whole different set of problems. Okay, so, and it's not my money if I don't win it. Anyway, was that it? That was the only one. Okay, cool. All right. So let's jump into solutions, right? So I'm going to go through the sources of distractions again very, very quickly. The time bandits, shiny object syndrome. That means you're just constantly chasing things around. No plan, no vision. And then we went into like the mental projections, the emotions running amok. So that segued into the weaknesses and needs. Okay, so solutions, right? Time bandits. And again, I'm just going to toss a couple of things out, not go too deeply into most of these. I have one or two that we'll actually look at, right? So the first one, time bandits, right? One is having clearly defined boundaries, right? That when people, family, when they call, okay, if they know when I'm busy, and I can train, I've trained mine very, very quickly, okay, that they don't call unless it's absolutely an emergency, or when they do call, the first question is, "Hey, do you have a minute? If not, I can call back later." Okay. Yeah, I have a minute, or actually at the moment I don't. Can I call you back in 5 minutes? Can I call you back in an hour? Can I call you back when I'm finished with this thing? Okay. Yeah. In the beginning, it wasn't comfortable. Okay. For me, because I was worried they were going to be angry, but I needed things to get done, and I had to just do it. And it wasn't comfortable for them because they weren't used to family members, like making them schedule a time or not prattle on about whatever. Okay. Work-wise, now right now I'm rebuilding staff, but when staff are in place, there is a system at the academy called the DDU system. DDU stands for Drop Dead Urgent. Okay. And so I have a spot on my calendar, on my daily calendar, that this is the time period when I return calls. So there are scripts at the academy that if somebody else takes the phone call, and let's say it's for an instructor on the floor, or it's for me, or whatever, if we're in teaching mode, we're in teaching mode, right? If but the way the scripts generally work is, one, is this urgent? Okay. No. Okay. Well, Sensei Miller typically, or the director, whatever the title is at that moment, normally returns calls between 1 and 2 in the afternoon. Is that okay? Okay. Or at the end of the day, does that work? Whatever. And they'll yay, nay, whatever. Okay. So the first thing we have to do is get off the table drop dead urgent. But we've also defined what drop dead urgent is. Okay. Not, I don't leave it up to other people's definitions. Because some people, right? Hey, don't let me forget. Yeah, this was an urgent. Yeah, I need to talk to him now. And then hop on the phone and, hey, don't forget that when you take me to the store next Thursday, I have to get eggs. Not urgent. Okay? So urgent is defined by the dojo's on fire, the IRS is the door, or there's a medical emergency that I need to, jump in family-wise. Right? My wife knows this. Everybody knows. Okay, so, but clearly defined boundaries and guarding your time. So one is for others, the boundaries, and one is guarding your time. Okay? If your time were a bank account and you only have so many minutes, hours, days, weeks, months left over. Right? Now, if it truly doesn't matter what gets done, then it doesn't matter. Lessons like this should roll off your back like water off a duck's ass. Okay, so, but if it does, then, right, but maybe time bandits aren't an issue for you. Okay? So next one, shiny object syndrome, okay, is where you're just jumping around, right? In the martial arts, what this looks like, several of my teachers have called this perpetual white belt syndrome. What that means is somebody goes through a martial art and they learn these big lessons. They learn the techniques, they learn the skills, they get some belts and all that, but they feel like they're not learning anymore. But what's really happening in the progress realm is that in the beginning, when we learn something brand new, every freaking lesson is an epiphany. Every technique, every skill. It's brand new. Oh, this is the way the ninja do it. Okay, cool. So, oh, this is the right. But as you get those things under your belt, then the transition becomes where things become more tactical and strategic. And then one of the next phases is it becomes more about the principles and concepts being employed and applied. And then after that, it's fixing little things that could slow you down, that could create an opening that you didn't know existed before. But this particular attacker type or fighter type or fighter mentality, right, watches for these things and targets those. Oh shit, I better sew that up, right? It's going from this kind of a thing because you learned that certain fighter types like us will attack that, right? And moving it into this angled kind of thing that's very difficult to grab a hold of. It's very difficult to hit. It's just it's this cool little angle, right? And then, but as the lessons get smaller, the recognition for those advanced people is that they become more global, right? For the lower level person, a lesson is ginormous, but the focus is it's that lesson. But the higher we go, the lessons become smaller. Like people, a bunch of years ago, I used to take students to a beginner level or entry level 3-day, 4-day seminar that my first teacher in this art, Stephen Hayes, would run. And, you know, I had been to almost a dozen of these things, right? And they're like, why do you keep going to these things? You keep paying the same amount and whatever, and you go and like, don't you know all this stuff? Yeah. But every time I go, he says something different or something new pops up about this little thing, this little nuance, and it gives me a new way to look at it. I go to Japan, spend probably $4,000 every time I go to Japan for 2 weeks, right? Holy shit, dude! Haven't you seen all this stuff before? Yeah, I pretty much feel like the physical techniques themselves. Yeah, I've done that one. I've done that one. I've done that one the way Ishizuka Sensei does it. I've done that one the way Nagato Sensei does it, or whatever, right? But why do you keep doing that? Because if I come back with one little piece, it will have been worth it. One little piece worth that. No. You understand? I'm not going to learn a new technique. I'm not going to learn a new variation. I'm going to learn a new strategic perspective or tactical application or a timing thing that I can apply to minimum 70% of all the techniques I currently know that will instantly level up all of them. So I'm not paying $4,000 to learn a half a dozen or 20 new techniques. I only need one that will change dozens and dozens and dozens of techniques. Okay. But what ends up happening is when the techniques or the lessons start getting smaller or whatever, because the person hasn't been taught or they aren't tuned in to how growth works in relationship to the size of the lessons, they feel like they're not learning anything because they're still looking for the big things. And so they quit. And then they go jump into another thing, another style, another system or whatever, where the lessons look big. And then when that wanes, then they jump into another one where the lessons look big. Okay. White belt syndrome. Okay. But it's the same thing with hobbies. It's the same thing with pastimes. It's the same thing with series on Netflix. It's the same thing with starting a new endeavor, right? Whether it's a business or it's a project or it's a goal or whatever, right? We get the big rungs handled, but then we got these small things in between, and now it seems like it's a lot of work, or it's whatever, right? So there's just this constant dancing around. Okay, again, could be yours, could not be yours. Doesn't really matter. Okay. The next two, not having a clear goal or vision, or not having a well-developed, not having a plan, right? We're going to bring those two things together. And so 3 and 4 together is have a clear goal and develop a plan. Okay. So in military parlance, I need to bring up a note here that I had to myself that I did not transcribe. So let me do that. So I don't miss anything. I'm not sharing my screen, so I shouldn't pop across, but it will look like I'm reading my screen because I am. Right? Because I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to forget anything. There we go. Okay, so sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Okay, so in the military leaders, when they are working on mission accomplishment, right? They're planning a significant mission. The process that's used, and we use this. This is timeless, right? This is used in the Goma active. It's a fire meditation. It's an active meditation kind of thing that we do. That goes back 1,600 years through Mikyo development, but the Goma was actually, it's the Japanese translation of this thing that goes all the way back 3,500 years through the Vedic traditions, and in that tradition it's called Homa, Homa. But either way, it's this use of fire, active symbolic meditation kind of thing that uses the same process. Now you don't have to buy into the spiritual side of things or whatever. That's why I brought up the military use to begin with, and it's a backwards planning kind of thing. You start off with the end result, and then the question is, okay, what did I accomplish just before that? And what did I accomplish just before that, and just before that kind of thing, right? But so that's just kind of a heads up on it. We don't have a bunch of time for me to go through all these things and run you through an exercise, but you can do that. You can just kind of back up from it, right? What needs to be done? What needs to be done? All the way back to where you are at the moment. Now, you don't have to, well, I got up at 6:30 and I had a high protein breakfast. No. That's probably not necessary for most people, right? But if you're entering the Olympics and you have to have your nutrients and all that kind of stuff, and it's a huge part of your performance, then yeah, that probably goes in your backward planner to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing because that's one of the goals to be accomplished, right? Nutrient intake, right? But for most people, that's minutia. That's not the important part, right? So again, that's one piece. That's on the developing a plan, okay? But before you can develop a plan, you have to have a goal. You have to have an outcome that you're looking for, okay? So there's an acronym that I was introduced to that, an acronym is a bunch of letters that form a word, right? That seems a little, I don't know, cheesy, but the best ones are because they're hard to forget. Okay? If you have an acronym that you can't remember, then it doesn't you no good, right? You might as well remember the whole thing. Okay, so the acronym for this this establishment of a solid, clear goal, something to aim for, right, is BATPAD, right? So where does Batman live? In the BATPAD. I'm a product of the 60s and 70s. Sorry, right? So BATPAD, BATPAD. Okay, so a well-formulated goal should be believable. You have to believe that you can do it. Right? It has to be actionable. Right? It has to be something that you can work on, or people that are helping you can work on to accomplish. Okay, right? My goal is world peace. Okay, well, I believe that world peace is possible. Actionable by me or a small team? Guess what? I'm not shooting for. Okay, not that I won't help, but right. So believable, actionable. The T is tangible. Right? It has to be something that you can get your hands on. Okay. Now, experiences can be tangible, but what we're going to be aiming for is producing the tangible parts, like having a successful vacation. My wife and I, we like to go on cruises and stuff like that. So we're going to have this great vacation. Okay. But what needs to be taken care of is the airfare or the road trip, right? The gas in the car, the supply list, the tickets paid for, the insurance paid for, all that kind of stuff, right? So the tangible thing, we are taking a cruise, right? We have to get from point A to point B to do that. We're going to these specific places, that kind of thing, right? Feet on the ground, right? In Cozumel, Mexico, or whatever, right? So that kind of thing. The P stands for personal, right? This shouldn't be something that you're supposed to do because of your status or your gender or your whatever, okay? It should be something that does it for you. You are motivated because it's personal, right? That's one of those things is going to keep you going when shit gets challenging. Okay. The A is achievable. Okay. So the A in PAD, right, is achievable. Right. So not just believable. I believe I can do that. Right. But it has to be achievable. Okay. Like, I don't know, in your lifetime, as my Jewish grandfather used to say, when I would spit out a goal and then I would take too long, right? See, because the rule of time management when it comes to goal accomplishment or mission accomplishment is whatever time you set for a goal to be accomplished, right, it will take that amount of time plus 20%. Right? That's because most people don't allow for time in their deadline setting and time frame. They don't allow for nature. They don't allow for life. They don't allow for derailments. Some people, they allow for too much, but it has to be achievable. So what he would say is, is that going to be done before I'm old? Is that going to be, then it turned into, is that going to be done before I'm dead? The Jewish grandfather was really good at the whole guilt and shame. It's not just Jewish grandmothers, it's grandfathers too. Anyway, so believable, actionable, tangible, personal, achievable, and then the D is describable, right? You have to be able to describe it. One of my mentors used to say, if you can't if you can't describe the goal in words, how the hell are you going to recognize it out in the world? Okay? So it has to be describable. You have to be able to map it out. You have to be able to create that plan. Okay. So believable, actionable, tangible, personal, achievable, describable. And that's for having a clear goal. Okay. And then now we're at the mental projections and write our own little devices, right? Weaknesses and needs. Okay. So what I have for this is just a teaching that I got from Hatsumi Sensei. It's very short, very sweet. We'll take some questions, wrap things up. But according to Hatsumi Sensei, he said, forced willpower, right? It rarely works, right? What he said was crude suppression of personal needs and habit patterns is the hard way to rid ourselves of vulnerabilities and not effective or sustainable for most in the long run. I should probably flip this back to my original screen. There we go. So crude suppression of personal needs and habit patterns is the hard way to rid ourselves of our vulnerabilities, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the best way is to openly and honestly look at those things we think we want and the things we want to avoid to come to an honest assessment of our weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Okay? Before I wrap this up, let's go back to some of these things where I said that there were usually underlying things. Right? Somebody who becomes, let's say, a martial arts teacher, it may seem like, and they may speak like, they're trying to help other people, learn how to protect themselves and whatnot, when really what there is that they're operating from a perspective from vanity, if it's on the weakness side, or a pride thing on the need side, right? Because what they really have is a deep-seated, unspoken need to be in control, to be in charge. Okay, somebody who becomes a priest, right? May seem like it's very, altruistic, and it's all about, God and helping people live better lives and all that. But again, same issue, right? They've got control. They have, whatever. Okay. Now, This is not me identifying groups. This is any given person. So even the Buddha talked about uh, uh, people becoming a priest because it allowed them to sound like they were knowledgeable. It made them, other people would look at them, right? It could be about image, right? Boy, he's really wise, right? Oh, he's so pious. He's so godly and all that. When in reality, they're just regurgitating the lessons. Okay? But what he did say was, if they stick with that long enough, they'll eventually become enlightened in spite of themselves. But politicians, right? They run under this story of helping the community and all that kind of stuff, right? When really they have feelings of weakness and insecurity and that kind of thing, and presenting themselves as being strong fighters for the people helps to cover that up, because ego is really good at hiding things. Okay, so back to that thing from Hatsumi Sensei, right? Where we need to come to an honest assessment of our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities, and then from there we have to find ways to strengthen trouble areas, right? We cannot just close our eyes and pretend that these things don't exist. Okay? So how do we strengthen things, right? Well, we clearly, define boundaries. We get better time management skills. So we're not trying to work around the time bandits and try not to be frustrated and try to understand that people have need. Just get better time management skills and better communication skills to let people know that, look, this is okay. We might need to, when it comes to the shiny object syndrome, to just recognize that, look, what I have is a need for comfort. I have this addiction to doing, but what the hell am I going to do with it when I get it? Okay. Some people avoid promotions at work. They've got a great work ethic. They've got all the things that the executive level is looking for. God, this person would be a fantastic asset to the team. They think strategically, right? They operate tactically. They're in there. They care about their people, all that kind of stuff, right? They're mission driven, all of those things, right? So they offer the job, and the person goes, "Yeah, no, I'll pass. I kind of like what I'm doing." Oh, wow. Okay. Well, sorry to hear that, right? But secretly, what's going on is they have this us against them mentality, right? It's the workers against the leadership, and I can't take a job like that because that'll make me one of them, right? What are my coworkers going to think when I abandon them and become a sellout? See, but it's all based on their beliefs. It's all based on their perspective, right? So we need to be careful with these things, right? What's the reason that I didn't practice today? What's the reason that I didn't do the thing or work on a piece of the project or so anyway, now is this all the things? No, because there's other things in positive directions that some people are the shiny object syndrome, right? They need something to be happening, right? in video game design, I found out that there is a reward. Is it just rewards, or is it a reward or a challenge? Either way, there's this high point that's wired into video games that occur no less, right, no more time-wise than every 10 seconds. Holy shit. No wonder life is boring. Every 10 seconds? Or people that, you know, binge watch a lot of movies and all that kind of stuff, right? When was the last time you heard a freaking orchestra playing in the background for mood music based on what was going on in your life? You know, you hit the accelerator in your car to, you know, push past the speed limit a little bit more, and the music rises, and then well, shit. Right? But we can get wired to that kind of stuff. So, but what's going on behind it, right? You know, there's lots of other things that could be on here. Okay, self-doubt. There's all kinds of things. Okay, but this is where I thought I had enough time to cover, and I did. So let's go ahead and open it up to any of the last-minute questions and comments before we wrap this up. So, James, what do we got? Who do we have?
Victor jumped on for one.
Victor, thanks for taking time away from your cats. I appreciate it. Right? Victor's a true ninja just because, you know, he's surrounded by ninja mascots. The cat is the mascot of the ninja.
Yeah. Chris McLaurin had a question.
I bet. Anyway, Chris is one of my questions. Okay, what do we got?
Does every human carry vanity, and is it always a bad thing?
Does every human carry it? Well, I'm going to say, I haven't met every human on the planet, so I'm going to answer this from a different perspective. Since it is listed in multiple spiritual and religious traditions as an impediment, right? It's in the 7 deadly sins in Christianity. It's one of the 108 defilements that human beings have that they need to work through. In Buddhism, there's a whole bunch of these things. I'm going to say that over time, if it wasn't had by at least the greatest majority, that we could say virtually everyone, then it would be a problem. Is it always a bad thing? Vanity itself is a bad thing because it is narcissistically driven. Vanity is all about one's personal image, how they are viewed, how they present themselves, all that kind of thing. That's not the same as being concerned or focusing on cleanliness and not being offensive and those kind of things, right? Taking others into consideration when we're out there. I mean, somebody could be, they could be dirt ugly. I mean, from a physical standpoint, they could look like somebody didn't hit him with the ugly stick. They beat him with the whole damn forest. But this person doesn't dress slovenly. They, do the best they can to make sure they, don't smell offensively. They, don't cause people's brains to lock up because they got to figure out who and what the hell they are or whatever, right? And it's not a value judgment thing. This is recognizing that we do more with honey than we do with vinegar, right? So I want to present myself in a way. So yeah, but Sensei, it's not fair that people judge a book by its cover. I don't give a shit. Okay. If you were an enlightened person dealing with nothing but enlightened people, you'd be absolutely right. But since you're not, then this is all part of Ninja no Uge. In this case, are we manipulating them? No, I'm manipulating me so that I can present something that they need to be comfortable and consider me in a positive light. So I'll use the term influence instead of manipulation, because most people see manipulation as a bad thing. So concern for the way one presents themselves is outward. It's motivated to produce results, knowing how people filter things. Vanity is an all-consuming desire to be seen as the smartest, most beautiful, most flamboyant, whatever person in the room. Okay? That speaks of insecurities. Sorry, just what it is. So I know you don't have that issue, but for anybody that's listening that just thought that I attacked them and they jumped on after I put the disclaimer earlier, where this is not about you unless you see yourself in it. I'm not teaching to any individual. Even answering Chris's question, this is not about Chris. This is about Chris's question. But if one sees themselves within it, then what Chikai Sensei tell me? Note to self, right? Because ego doesn't get angry about things or get agitated or whatever unless it's concerned that the thing that it's recognizing as a possible threat or agitation or whatever is true. One of the biggest drivers of anger outside of an actual threat, right? A physical, whatever threat, and you can't escape it. One of the biggest drivers of anger is the concern or knowledge that what we hid has been exposed, and or we're afraid that that thing is true. Hopefully that helped. And if ego is still trying to, whoever's out there, if ego is still trying to make vanity an okay thing, then they either weren't listening or ego will hold on to whatever justifies its existence and validates its experience and reality. It will hold on to it in any way possible. Okay. Yeah, but. That's not yeah, bud or ho bud. So that's a ho but's this thing from the local people. Just sharing something with my local guys know about this because there's a region around Polish Italian region, and this is one of these sounds that just got bastardized from hey or ho buddy down to, it's like cotton gin, right? We all know that Eli Whitney did not invent the cotton gin, right? And this is not somebody else invented it and he beat him to the patent office by 5 minutes. I don't give a shit, right? He didn't invent the cotton gin. He invented something called the cotton engine and Southern draw, and the way the English was pronounced by the slave labor in the deep South that was processing cotton. It didn't come out cotton engine, came out cotton gin. And so guess what's in the history books? Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. What the flock is a gin other than a drink of the alcoholic version that, right? So anyway, what else we got, James? Is that it? Seriously?
Yep. Dave just said thank you for the teaching, and that was it.
That's what he said. Thanks for the teaching, and that was it.
No, I added that.
Oh. That's all she wrote. Spoke or garbled or whatever. Okay, cool. All right, so I think that's it. So we just wrapped up the Goshin Bo program. Right now, I am kind of at a crossroads because a lot of my folks that are going through the Mikyo stuff uh, have told me that they think they need more time to work through what they've been working on. However, I have some other people that have brought up a topic that I have not considered. I mean, I considered it because I have an instructor training program that I created a long, long time ago. It's adjusted a little bit here or there, but it really is this behemoth of a thing, and I rush people through it over a 15-week period. But I'm really taking a look at some problem areas that some folks have. Like I just had one of my students uh, tell me about the they're really conscientious about the how do you word this, the transactional aspect of teaching. So what that means in short words, small words, is one has a problem asking for uh, somebody to pay for tuition or asking for what the program is worth. Right? And that's, it's a personal issue or whatever. But that kind of led me to thinking about, instead of having an all-in-one kind of program, because the program was originally designed to get people through a first stage level where they could teach at my academy. And then the next iteration, I tagged on a marketing thing to it because it was online and people had training groups. So how do I promote it so I get more students and things like that? So it would really be kind of a series of smaller programs, and each one could be anything from like how to promote my school or training group, right? To get qualified prospects to even, contact me and say, hey, tell me about your program, to enrollment processes, to organizing and teaching classes, things that I've been doing since I started my first training group in 1980. Well, not counting the military, because I had one going in 1986. But I opened the first doors on a part-time school in 1989, went full-time in 1991. And through COVID and all kinds of stuff, right? So if anybody's interested in that kind of direction, reach out, post on the platforms that you're on, or shoot an email over to warriorc@warriorconceptsonline.com. That's warrior and the letter C at warrior-concepts-online.com. Dash, the minus sign, not the underscore. Okay. And let me know, if you run a training group, want to in the future, where where you are at the moment, right? So do you have a group, has enough students, but you're having an attrition problem? That means people quit and you're not getting new students to fill that in. And so pretty soon you're going to be a walking, talking example of an Agatha Christie book, and then there were none. Come on, martial arts teachers, humor. Anyway, James is laughing. Anyway, all right. So gotta find people with culture, man. That's the cool thing about this art. I've met so many people that, regardless of their occupation or their background or whatever, just really, really intelligent thinkers. That's the cool thing, because your brain is the number one weapon / tool that a ninja possesses. Okay? So cool beats. But if that direction, is important, I don't know if I'll start off with a program, and maybe I'll just, write some articles and get some lessons out and things like that. Let people know that I might have been learned something. But either way, and we are, I am getting the prerequisite programs into evergreen mode, that people can sign up for those things. It won't involve the coaching and stuff that it normally does when we do live things, but they're in transition right now, and they're going to be offered so that people can do it as a do-it-yourself kind of thing. And then those are the prerequisites for getting involved in full Mikyo and those kind of things, right? Ninja Mind program and bunch of these things. So anyway, anything else, James? Anything you want to throw on top of that fire? I know you just, thanks for staying awake for the whole thing. I appreciate it. Right? I know I can just drone on about stuff.
No, I don't have anything.
All right, cool beans. None. Okay, but there are no other questions or comments? We're all good? Okay, cool beans. Guys, thanks a lot for hanging out with us again for another 2 hours. Wow, you guys got some serious stick-to-itiveness. All right, so hopefully I'll see you on for Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday on Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And if not, no harm, no foul. Everything's recorded. And yeah, we'll see you next time on KUDEN. Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.